Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Parent Ed Talk, Community Coming Together, the Micro-School Movement with Shauna Causey. I'm Diana Cherry. I'm our social media specialist and trending editor here at ParentMap. And for those of you not familiar with ParentMap, we are a content-rich resource devoted to assisting you on your parenting journey. We proudly publish free print news magazines, and we've published several parenting books. We also host an award-winning website, and check out parentmap.com. Today we're speaking with Shauna Causey. Thank you so much for joining us, Shauna. Shauna is the founder and CEO of WEEKDAYS Micro-Schools, an organization matching parents and teachers to form neighborhood micro-schools. She's held executive roles at Google, Nordstrom, Decide.com, Startup Weekend, and Madrona Ventura Labs. She has been featured in national media, including Marie Claire Magazine, The Today Show, Bloomberg, and NBC. She's also advised the Obama White House on technology initiatives. Before we begin today, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items really quickly. Today's webinar is being recorded and may be republished for education and promotional usage. We will email everyone who's registered today a link to the recording after the event as well. We invite your questions, so please use the Q&A feature on your screen, and we could not do this without you zooming in, so thank you so much for supporting our virtual events. Thank you to our series sponsors, of course, Leg Up, Yellowwood Academy, No More Under, Little School, and Morningside Academy. Thanks again so much for joining us, Shauna.
All right, well, thanks for having me. I'm such a big fan of ParentMap, and I'm happy to jump in on this topic. I've been working on it so closely for the last, more than a year, really, even before the pandemic. So thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that. So I thought there's so many different questions that have come up on this topic, and it's obviously a hot topic. The New York Times a couple weeks ago posted, "Here come the micro schools," and it just seems like it's the headlines are everywhere. There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of concerns. And so I'm excited to jump into it. I'll probably cover some of your questions during this presentation, and then there's probably going to be some afterwards, and I invite you to share any and all candid questions, anything that's top of mind, and happy to talk about those. So I thought I'd just start briefly with a little bit about why I'm here talking to you about micro schools, and then a little bit of context on sort of what is the environment with micro schools, and then jumping into the specifics of what they are, how they're set up, the pros, the cons, and addressing some of the questions that you all sent before today's webinar. So we'll jump right into it. There we go. This is my son, and he's really sort of the reason why I started working in this field. So when he was born, I was on 10 different wait lists in my neighborhood for daycare, and I realized I needed to be on a wait list before I even knew that I was going to have him when I thought about having a baby, because it's a tough environment for parents looking for childcare, let alone for some who don't have enough to pay what the going rate is. So it's obviously a tough environment. I ended up taking myself out of the workforce for a year because I couldn't find great options. And then fast forward to him when he's 4 years old, and I'm looking for a preschool. And again, I'm on 8 different wait lists. So, and he had a speech delay, and he really needed a little bit more personalized attention versus going into a classroom with 20 children when he was 4 years old. So that's when I have a background in technology, and I was at Madrona Venture Labs as a partner, helping other people start companies, specifically women. And I really started looking at this industry and this model, and obviously trying to solve my own problem as a parent. And so a year ago, I ended up launching WEEKDAYS, and really it's focused on small neighborhood schools with more personalized care, safer environments for health reasons, and then the teachers and micro school leads bring their own passions and interests to the program, whether it's arts or cooking or fully outdoor programs. So that's really a little bit of the background on why I'm here and why I feel so passionately about this topic. And the last thing I'll say on this is that when I realized how much preschool teachers made in Seattle, it's right around $30,000 a year. And I've been talking to hundreds of different teachers, and it really made me angry that arguably the most important person outside of our family who's caring for our children really doesn't make enough to live in our neighborhoods. And so that's another reason why I feel so passionately about this, feeling like the people who are watching our children and the teachers should be making a fair wage. So that's kind of the background on why I'm here and why I started this initiative, why I started Weekdays. So I wanted to give you all just a little bit of background on the actual industry right now. Even before I shared a little bit about my personal experience, when you look at the industry as a whole, and some of you might know this, there's actually a childcare desert in many areas of the United States. And a childcare desert is basically means there's 3 times as many kids as there are qualified spots available. And a lot of this research does cover home-based programs as well. So there just is a lot of need, and it's frankly hasn't been an attractive profession for a lot of people, partly because of the low pay. So that's kind of what we were seeing before COVID hit. And now, with the pandemic, it's gotten really exponentially worse. So something like, and we're still kind of seeing the effects of this, but depending on the area, sometimes anywhere between 20 and upwards of 40% of childcare slots have closed either temporarily and some permanently. And then of course we know what's happening with schools, where a lot of them are partially remote or fully remote, like we have here. So it's really created this absolutely tough environment almost overnight for parents and teachers. So here's a little bit more sort of by the numbers, and this kind of gives you the scope of a lot of the headlines that you're seeing right now. In, I think even today, the Seattle Times covered this on their front page. So there's been at the height of the pandemic, during the school closures across the country, there was 55 million children impacted, over 124,000 public and private schools. So, I mean, massive, just like, try to get your head around that. Even though it's a problem, seeing the numbers, and every time I cover them, it's hard to believe. It's almost surreal that we're in this kind of an environment right now. And then we've done quite a few surveys with some of our partners and the survey ourselves. And what we've heard is that about a third of parents are looking for a different option, either because their programs have closed temporarily or because they've been closed permanently, or because they're not working downtown anymore, or they're not working where they used to have childcare or schooling support. They're now, many of them are working remote or working from home, and it's turning into a long-term option. So those are some of the driving forces of why we're seeing so many parents, really 1 in 3, looking for different options right now, and really shaking the whole system up. And then, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. The teachers are obviously in a desperate situation. We have 1 in 4 teachers who, for one reason or another, are high risk. So about 20% of teachers are around 55 years old or older. And that actually covers not just teachers, but all school administrators. So as you've seen probably from a lot of the different media coverage, they're worried. Some of them just do not want to go back to the classroom. And some of them are worried about, really getting sick and what that could mean for them. So it's become just a desperate issue, not only for parents, but also for teachers as well. And so obviously there's been a lot of people looking at alternate options, and right now we don't really know. I mean, we've started to hear a little bit about when a vaccine might come out, but we really don't see really any end in sight. So that's kind of the overall context on the environment that we're dealing with right now. And I think, there's no perfect options for anyone because we're thrown into this situation overnight, but a lot of folks are working on different options, including what we're working on with Weekdays. So really what we're seeing is this sort of emergence of micro schools. And even before the pandemic, I was talking about how they are safer for a lot of different reasons. And I think people kind of thought, yeah, I mean, that's great because my kid might not get sick as often. But now it's by far, I mean, for very obvious reasons, the number one thing that parents are concerned about when they think about how their children's going to learn in the fall. And so far and above, it's just been interesting for me to see before the pandemic, and now it's skyrocketed to the most important thing. And so one of the things that we do when we're helping parents and teachers set up micro schools is we have a COVID agreement where they agree as a group on social distancing and how they're going to treat social distancing. And everybody has to opt in to that if they want to be part of that micro school. And so that's been a really important part of setting expectations up front. And then of course, micro schools are local. And then I mentioned earlier, but the teachers really bring this unique domain expertise to their programs. So we have some that are forest schools that are fully outdoor. We have a lot of teachers who bring an art background. We have a classical opera singer who is also a teacher. And just these really unique, different types of activities to supplement either preschool learning or Seattle Public School learning. And so kids are able to experience different types of things than they would when they're sitting in a 20 or 30 person classroom all day. Which has been one of the bright spots as we look at what our kids can learn and what they can do. And again, getting some of that outdoor time because a lot of kids have been in front of screens for a long time. So the reason I started, one of the drawbacks and the reason I started Weekdays before the pandemic was because I saw that there wasn't a quality bar for these small neighborhood or in-home programs. And I really wanted to bring that kind of structure and support and quality bar that I was looking for as a parent to these programs. And as you might expect, part of that means background checks, exhaustive background checks of all the teachers. Part of it means liability insurance. Part of it means all the expectations and forms and paperwork that you need to set up and have an agreement between the teachers and parents. So those are some of the things that I felt like should be kind of standard for not only center-based, but also in-home programs as well. So what we do at Weekdays, we're a place to find and join amazing neighborhood micro schools, or if there isn't one in your neighborhood, you can kickstart one, and we'll come alongside and help you match you with other families and also with a qualified teacher. And then I shared a little bit about this earlier, but sort of the vision behind this is that the best teachers and the safest learning environments are actually close to you. They're in your neighborhood. And so we want to unlock those and allow these real neighborhood-based programs where potentially you could just walk over to your preschool or walk over to your, whether it's first or second grade support during the pandemic and have a great experience. So that's really, and then that's really our focus. And then we, at the core, are focused on supporting micro school leaders and teachers. So we like to support people who often describe teaching as a calling. Well, they just love to teach, and it's really sort of their passion, working with children. And we can tell pretty quick when we're working with a teacher if there's somebody that we want to support with Weekdays. We only end up supporting about 15% of everyone who shows interest in leading a micro school with Weekdays, specifically because we want experience and we want people to be in it for the right reasons. And so we do have a quality bar that we stick to. So I thought we could just get into some of the hot questions and topics that we have. Obviously, the first one is, what are micro schools? I get this question all day, every day. And I think that there's a lot of confusion on this topic. I mean, sort of at the basic way to describe it is there's this massive community effort right now, almost like a DIY effort with parents and with teachers to create these pods or micro schools of anywhere between 2 and 8 children. There's been a couple that we've supported that have been 10 children because some of the children came from the same families. But generally they're between 2 and 8 children. And they're either in the teacher or the micro school leader's home, or they are in the parent's home. And the parent's home is really more of a new structure since the pandemic hit, where many parents are working from home and they're able to create a space either a lot of times it's in a converted garage, sometimes it's a converted basement, There's outdoor classrooms and backyards. And then sometimes it's just using the dining room table for the children and converting that space. So you don't really need anything extra special. We do have a couple of our programs where parents have decided to convert full Airbnb units, or there's one that is a 800 square foot cottage schoolhouse in a backyard that's a brand newly built building. And so there's been a few that have created these very unique environments. The Wall Street Journal also covered a bit about this topic on the space, and they covered some parents in San Francisco who are using these Burning Man domes for schools. So they're just getting really creative. It's almost like a tent in the backyard. So they're using these very creative spaces to really create classrooms because they need the space and they need a place where their kids can learn. So that's generally, at the most basic level, what micro schools are. But then there's a lot of confusion on people saying that it's homeschooling or it's childcare. You've probably seen a lot of different questions on, like, do I need to be licensed? And what are the agreements that I need? And some people are angry because they think that most of these are taking their kids out of public schools and not supporting public schools anymore. And so there's just seems like there's a lot of confusion as people are trying to figure out what exactly we're talking about. And what I can share is there's really 3 different buckets generally that sometimes you'll see people confuse and put together when they're talking about micro schools. So the first one is really childcare. And here locally, that is really under DCYF. And so there are licensing there's licensing considerations that you have to think about when you're looking at childcare, and that's generally infants and preschool age, where, and there's a lot of different nuances to this, but if it's more than 4 hours and it's not in the parent's home, generally you do need to look at getting licensed. And so that's one area. You might have seen some people say, well, micro schools are illegal because you don't have a license. And the answer is, it depends. It depends on the age. It depends on where the micro school is going to be. It depends on a few other factors as well. But childcare is one very specific sector of this overall discussion. And then you see a lot of people talk about, well, this is homeschooling, and homeschooling, you have to do certain things, and it's that could be illegal. I've seen that question a few times. And really, yes, homeschooling is something, different and unique. Obviously, homeschooling existed before the pandemic, where people were not enrolling their children in public school, and instead they would teach their own children. And for that, there is some paperwork that needs to be filled out and sent in, and just so you are essentially saying that you're not going to enroll your children in public school. But I will say that the third bucket is the majority of what we're hearing from all of the parents right now. And it's really what we support, which is preschool programs, infant programs and preschool programs, which do fall under childcare, and we support those as micro schools. But also at the elementary age, at the early elementary age, it's folks who are still enrolled in Seattle Public Schools, but they are getting somebody to come in, or whatever other local school, Bellevue, Issaquah, all the different ones, but they're getting someone to come in as a lead or a tutor to help with that schooling, and then also provide many different types of activities. So whether it's outdoor time, whether it's learning some of those basics they need to learn in school through art or cooking, or sort of music is a popular one as well, STEM, tech, science. So that's really kind of what the majority of, when people are talking about micro schools, generally they're talking about, I need some help during the pandemic because my child's not going to be in school all day and I have to work as a parent, and I need someone to help them with their schooling and get them outside. So that's generally just a quick background on it. There's so much confusion on that. And especially on Facebook, you'll see a lot of different comments come up. We talked a little bit about this. So health and safety, for the schools that we support and the pods that we support, we background check, reference check. We personally vet all the teachers. We ask them to follow all the CDC guidelines. They have a touchless thermometer. They take temperatures in the morning. They ask parents to take temperatures as well before the school year starts. So there's a lot of different safety precautions. There's also the COVID social distancing agreement that they all agree on together. And so that's, I think, a really big part of this. And then again, we talked a little bit about the type of teachers we support and the local angle as well. And this is just a couple, I thought I would share a couple different examples of our schools. The middle one is called True Nature. It's a forest program in Seward Park that's completely, it's learning completely outdoors, which is really neat. But we have all kinds of different programs. I think I have two more here. And you know, the other question I get is, who are the micro school leads? Who are the teachers who are leading these? And what's really fascinating, and I think it is kind of a bright spot of this, is that we're seeing a lot of teachers with formal teaching experience who have left the profession, but have decided to come back because they feel compelled to help. And now they see this as a real profession or a valid way that they can not only help, but also get paid for what they're doing. I've heard from numerous teachers who felt like sitting in a classroom of 30 kids became kind of untenable for them, and they wanted a little bit more control over their own curriculum to be able to support the kids in a more personalized way versus a more standardized way. And so that's been fun to see people coming back to the profession to help during this time. We also have a lot of people with childcare experience who've been former nannies, who've gotten some curriculum support before they've gotten their pod or micro school up and running. And so those are two of the really popular types of groups that we see that we support. As far as current teachers in public school, we have not heard from very many of those. The only ones that we have heard are some of the ones who feel like they might be higher risk and are not comfortable going back to the classroom and just don't know when they will be comfortable going back to the classroom. But we haven't heard from too many teachers that have just moved straight over from public school. And then a little bit about kind of how it works. We and even if you don't use weekdays, this is generally kind of how it's set up, is that parents will form a group, or they'll be looking for other folks in the neighborhood. They generally look for safety, looking for other people who have the same safety guidelines. They're looking for location, and they're looking for kids who are about the same age so that they can kind of learn the curriculum together. Oops, and then a little bit about the landscape. I get this question a lot too, so I thought I would get ahead of it. When the pandemic hit, we heard from hundreds of people who are interested in teaching micro schools right away. So back in March and April, but we weren't hearing from very many parents. It was really this massive influx of teachers and micro school leads. And then about 4 weeks ago, when public schools and preschools and childcare centers started shutting down or going remote, we almost overnight just started hearing from thousands of parents. And so that's really kind of the environment we're in now, is everybody's trying to figure out what they're going to do for fall. It's mostly working parents who are trying to figure out how they stay in the workforce. Some single parents, some dual income, just figuring out like, I need to, I often hear, I need to stay in the workforce. I have to keep my job, but I can't do that when I have 1 or 2 or 3 children, that are under 10 years old. And so that's kind of the desperate situation that we're hearing just right now from hundreds and hundreds of parents here in Washington State. And so we're getting them set up with local programs, really across the board, across kind of all of the different neighborhoods. There's not like one area where it's been more popular. It's really kind of all the way from Bellingham, Renton, Bainbridge Island, Mercer Island, Fall City. It's kind of happening all over the state. And then, this is obviously a hot topic too, and this was part of what was covered in the Seattle Times article and a lot of the other media that's come up, which is something that a lot of us who are working in this industry care deeply about. And that really is like, what options exist? How do I do this if I'm having a hard time financially, or if I can't afford it? And how do we make these opportunities really more equitable for everyone? And I will say that there's a lot of work to be done in this area. There is some funding that's available. So many of you probably know that like there's vouchers and different opportunities that exist for funding for folks who apply for those through the government. And those that existed before the pandemic still exist. So those options are still there. I will say that there's obviously not enough. This has become a massive situation over the last couple months, and the funding just isn't there that should be there to keep up with this. And I think that's one thing, one to do that we all have is to, and I'm spending a lot of time on it, trying to figure out how we can get more funding and how I can help in any way I can lobby for that. So we're also seeing that that some businesses are stepping in and they are creating either opportunities, resources, or even partially or fully subsidizing childcare and school support right now. So that's been also a bright spot because those programs can usually roll out much faster than some of the other options that exist. And if anyone here is wondering what you can do, if you're interested in that, I would say go talk to your HR department, bring it up with your company. It's a hot topic, and we have truly dozens of companies that have reached out to us over the last couple weeks wanting to look at some form or another. We have some hospitals. We're starting a partnership with one of the top hospitals this week, and they don't have any funding to help their team, but we're working on ways to have that partnership where they don't have to have any funding to help their team and their doctors and their nurses. But we also have all kinds of different companies who are offering partial subsidies. Some are doing some free remote learning for their team members and using us. And then some are fully subsidizing micro schools for their team members. So I would say that that's a hot topic within companies. And if it's something that you're interested in, I would encourage you to talk to your HR department and see if there's anything that might be done. And then the third one is scholarships. So with a lot of these micro schools, the teachers and the parents are creating one spot that's either a sliding scale or a full scholarship spot. This is not a perfect solution, but it's really coming about because the parents and the teachers feel deeply, care deeply about making sure that this is equitable in their neighborhood, and often trying to reach out to people to see who might need that spot through different organizations or nonprofit groups. So we're seeing that really emerging with a lot of the micro schools, not all of them, but I've been really happy to see that topic has been brought up, and it's been a hot topic, and we encourage that from our end. And we on our end, we volunteer all of our technology and our resources when that comes up and when scholarships are available. And then I've had several school districts from across the country reach out looking at partnerships. So this one might not move as fast as some of the other options, but I'm glad to see that kind of we're seeing solutions trying to be figured out really from all different angles. And the options with the school districts are generally focused on using school district spaces. We help with some of the micro school leads or teachers. Sometimes they are outdoor focused programs that the school will help out. Sometimes they're looking at putting some funding in, moving some funding over. So those are really just emerging conversations right now. Unfortunately, the school year is coming really quick, and I'm not sure if they're all going to be in place before the school year, but I'm happy to see so many different types of people and so many different types of groups who are focused on this topic. And I think we need to keep this conversation going, and we need to keep looking for more and more solutions right now, because we just don't know how long this is going to last. So I think that was all I had. We can open it up to questions. If anybody wants to reach me, here's my email, our website, and then we have 2 Facebook groups that help match if you're interested in a micro school or interested in even a co-op with other people in your neighborhood. You can go on one of these Facebook groups. There's a local one for Western Washington, and there's a national one, and you can just follow the conversation there, or meet other parents in your neighborhood to form a co-op or a micro school. Should we open it up to questions?
Hi, Shauna. Sorry about that delay. Okay, so here are some questions that we've received so far. What are some common misconceptions about microschooling?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people say that they're illegal. You just can't do a micro school. And it really depends on so many different options. For instance, if you're trying to create a micro school for preschoolers that's not in a parent's home and it's a full day program, that needs to be licensed. So that's not okay. But if you're bringing in somebody as a micro school lead to support, let's say, first grade or second grade public school curriculum, and they're also helping your children get outdoor time and helping them learn through different activities, then that's really kind of under the hood. That's really considered more like a tutor. And that's kind of what we're dealing with there. So so it's hard to, when you see those types of things, there are some nuances to it. And you know, whether it's me or someone else talking to someone to make sure you understand the type of program that you're setting up is really, really important. And not only just to follow the general rules, but to make sure that the kids are safe.
So one of the questions we received is, if somebody's interested in this, how would they find a micro school in their area? And and if there's not one in their area, like what, if they know nothing about this approach, how do they get started?
Yeah. Well, we can help with that. You can definitely visit our site and you can see micro schools that exist in your neighborhood, in your zip code, or you can kickstart one. And there's a process that you can just follow on our website to do that, where we'll help match you with other families or with a teacher. If you need a teacher, we'll help vet the teacher and give you all of the support and structure. There are no upfront fees. We just take, once the program's up and going, the payments go through our platform and we take a small service fee unless it's a scholarship spot, and then it's completely free on our end. So that's one way. Another way could be, you know, if you're interested in more of like a co-op with other people in your neighborhood, and maybe you can teach or you can lead the school for a day, you know, you could go on Facebook, either on our local group, which is Facebook /groups/ Seattle Micro School Connection, and just put an ask out for others in your area and see if other parents are interested. Either there's been conversations on play dates, just like wanting some socialization. A lot of parents are teaching the kids themselves, but they do want to have a small group in their neighborhood they can meet up at the park and agree on social distancing rules and just have the kids have some socialization. There's been play groups, there's been, again, co-ops, and then there's full micro school groups that have a qualified teacher that have been set up. So I think there's a few different types of options. We can help, or you can just put the word out on Facebook or Nextdoor or any of your local community groups.
Cool. That actually goes really well into my next question, because you mentioned qualified teachers. And one of the questions that we've gotten frequently, actually, from a number of audience members is, what are the requirements for teachers that you work with, that you set up clients with?
Yeah, great question. So we first look for experience. So everybody that we support has to have some type of childcare experience or teaching experience in some way to even be qualified. We don't support people who might have been working like at a restaurant and have no experience, or, you know, in a gig worker type job, who are coming in thinking like, oh, I could make a decent amount of money doing this. And so while that might be something down the road where there could be a training put in place, right now we only support people who already have some type of experience. Sometimes that experience is just as a parent. So we have some of our best micro schools are some wonderful teachers who their children are older, they're empty nesters, and these women have spent, you know, really the last 18 years raising their own children and have loved it and miss it. And so they kind of give back to the community. They feel like it's giving back to the community by opening a pod or a micro school. And then they're able to also earn some money doing it as well and contribute to the, you know, some of them need to pay a mortgage or contribute to their household income. So that's been really great. So we look for experience, and then we really sort of have a series of questions where we can get pretty quickly to why you're doing this. And we really want to support the people who are in it because they love working with children. They have a passion for working with children. And again, they kind of feel like it's a calling. Those are the people that we get really excited about supporting. And those are also, you know, if you put on your parent hat, those are also the type of people as a parent that you want your children with, because they care so deeply about your children's emotional well-being, and they're, that they're going to get social skills, that they're going to learn through relationships, that they're going to learn all the basics so they're ready for the next grade of school. And that's where I get really excited about being in this field, because after I talk to, I've talked to so many of them now, and I can see really quickly if they're in it because they really feel like this is what they love to do. And so that's really the second part. And then we have a partnership with 2 former FBI agents, and they have a background check company. And so we have a partnership with them. So we take background checks, very seriously. So every single one of our micro school leads and teachers goes through a full background check with our partner. And so that's really sort of the third step. And then the fourth step is we connect them with the parents, and the parents and the teachers figure out if they're a good fit for each other. And so that's really kind of at the highest level, the different steps that they go through.
Awesome. So you did kind of address this in your presentation, but I think this is kind of, like you said, it's such a hot topic that I feel like we need to kind of dial into it, which is a consistent concern that parents and educators really have about microschooling is equity and access. So how can parents who care about equity and access address that issue if they're considering microschooling?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. Like, one, not everybody has this luxury, but if you can do more of a co-op model where you are able to help the kids during a half day or a partial day, or whatever your schedule allows, then some parents are able to form groups together where they're trusting other parents and able to bind together, where they don't have to hire a micro school lead or a teacher. That's one way. Again, I think contacting your HR. I mean, I would recommend anyone contacts their HR department and brings this up, because what I'm seeing is businesses of all sizes, from small nonprofits of 8 people all the way up through Fortune 50 companies. We're working with all of the different range right now, because they all feel like this is imperative to being able to have their employees work. And so sometimes they're moving over different types of benefits, whether it's like a gym membership benefit, and they're moving that over to childcare during the pandemic. And they're saying, like, okay, we're going to help out in some way and move some other line items that we're spending money on as an HR department over to this one, because it's an urgent problem. And the great thing about that is it's not just the executives that benefit from that. It's all employees who are receiving this support from companies. So I wouldn't count that one out, almost no matter what size company that you're at. That's not an option for everyone, though. So I think looking at local micro schools that are forming in your area, contacting teachers that already have micro schools up and running, and seeing if they're offering any type of scholarship in any way, or if there's any possibility for that, or if they know anyone. I think, just putting the word out. There's a lot of people who want to help, and we're looking at ways to have a more formal process for that right now. But since this is all emerging so fast, there's not really a great formal process in any way for this. Again, there's funding that exists from the government that you can apply for as well. And I would encourage anyone who qualifies for that and wants that to start taking those steps, because the government, really needs to understand the need here. And unless we document it, they don't understand the need. And I think that plays right into the fact that we should all be calling anyone and everyone that we can to say that we need more funding for this sector. It's vitally important. And, bills have come up, and there's still nothing that's passed yet that brings more money into this problem. And I think that it's great that we've got PPP loans and businesses have had support, but there's just so much demand right now. And the unfortunate thing about all of this is the kids that are having the toughest time, that are suffering when they don't have support. So I think, as much as we can look in this conversation, as much as we can talk about solutions and working towards solutions and trying to make solutions for everyone, right now is when we need to do that. I care
it's a really good point
about
too,
I could
about
keep talking
pressuring.
about this topic.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point to be pressuring our legislators as well as the companies that we work for to help us kind of come up with those solutions too. Okay, so one of the questions we got was, do micro schools follow state curriculum?
So in most cases, I know I kind of covered this in one of the slides. In most cases that we're supporting, the micro schools are having their children enrolled in public schools if they're, K through 5th, which is generally the types of programs we support. Some of them have infants, but really our sweet spot is preschool programs up through 5th grade. And so for the elementary school programs, we do have, I believe 100% of them are following public school curriculum, where the micro school leads are supporting and helping with public school curriculum in conjunction with the parents in the evenings on homework. And then they're bringing, all kinds of other activities and different types of learning, including a lot of outdoor time to the day. But I think that's been one of the hottest topics, because people think this is homeschooling. People think that parents are taking their kids out of public schools. And I know there are some parents doing that, but by far the majority of parents that we're hearing, everyone that we're hearing from really isn't ready to take their kids out of public school. They want to stay in public school. They just want help because they have to work.
Just looking over our other questions. So one of the other questions that we got is, how do micro schools and micro school teachers support families who have children at different grade levels, since that would likely come up quite a bit? How does that work in your experience?
Yeah, some of our, I would say about half of our programs have children that are from the same family, but different age groups. And part of the reason for that is because they're hosted a lot of times in the parent's home, so it's easier. There's also less exposure to other families and more people when you can keep your kids together. And then, micro school is definitely a hot term right now. But in the past, micro schools have really focused on mixed age programs. And so some of the programs we support, like I mentioned, maybe around 40 to 50% are mixed age. And then the rest are just focused on, for instance, kindergarten or just 1st grade or just 2nd grade. So there really are options for both sides. It's a lot easier to get one going and faster if you're willing to create a space in your own home that can kind of kickstart it. So then you're able to open up, let's say, your house to like 4 other children if you have 2 children, and then the group is 6 children, and they can generally be around the same age group. So we're seeing some that are, for instance, kindergarten through 3rd grade, and it'll be a mixed group. It does create a little bit of differences when it comes to the curriculum. But then there's the advantage of kids being able to learn from each other at different ages, which I think has been really neat to see too. And that's obviously something that you can try during this pandemic time, and kids can learn in different ways, which I think has been great to see.
Cool. Another question we're getting a lot is pricing. So can you talk about the average costs for a family to consider micro schools through your organization? What are the average costs associated with that?
Yeah, so the costs really depend on a few different factors. It depends on the number of kids in the micro school. So some parents only want 2 or 3 children, and then to be able to have a micro school lead or a teacher, it's just going to be more expensive if it's that size, because they also need to commit. The micro school lead needs to commit to this and sort of know how much they're going to be able to make. So in those cases, it's been a little bit more. That's not as common. Generally, these are between 6 and 8 children. So getting to something that works for the micro school lead is generally a lot easier. So it depends on the number of children. It depends on the experience, oftentimes, of the micro school lead or the teacher. We have, again, some women who have childcare experience and have 10 years as a nanny and have their own curriculum that they bring in to support the public schools. And then we have some teachers that have formal teaching experience in a 30-person classroom and a master's degree. And So they generally, are making a little bit more to make this worth it for them. And then the other thing that comes into play is the location. So we are seeing that in some areas, generally, just like preschools, the price is a little bit less. In some areas, it's a little bit more, depending on who's living there and the price of the area. And then the last factor we talked a little bit about is if there's a scholarship spot or not. And sometimes that brings the cost up a little bit for everybody else in the program, and the teacher also, there's an impact for the teacher. And then we, again, volunteer all of our resources when teachers and parents are willing to have a scholarship spot. So those are kind of the factors. And then and then if it's a half-day program or a full-day program. So it's very common. We're seeing a lot of half-day programs and we're seeing a lot of full-day programs. So then the range of cost usually goes from $90 a week all the way up to, in some cases, $550 a week.
Great, thank you. So how do micro-schools provide support for children with special needs? Are teachers able to work with kids who have an IEP or 504 plan, or to help create those as they might in a public school setting?
We've had, my son has a speech delay. So this has been also an important topic for me as well. We have a lot of teachers who have experience with special needs that are teaching pods or micro schools right now. And I think that that's been great to see, because there's also been a lot of need for that. And so that's been, I would say, one of the hottest topics that we've seen. And thankfully, we've both had supply and demand when it comes to that. It's just trying to match those. And in some cases, it has been hard to figure out in a specific area where there's children who want to join a program. If there's not a teacher, then we also have some remote options, some really talented people who are still even working in the school district. They're just, in some cases across the country, they're supplementing this. And so the great thing is if anyone's open to virtual programs in this case, we can tap into some of the most talented people across the country. That's not the best option, but if there's not the perfect teacher in your area for that, then oftentimes we can get somebody at least who can do, an hour a couple times a week, or even in some cases an hour a day.
Great. So can you talk a little bit more about, you mentioned a little in your presentation, but are there any additional safety protocols that you're helping micro schools that you're managing to implement during COVID-19?
Yeah, so the CDC has pretty specific guidelines on how they want schools, which includes in-home programs, to operate. And I've been really happy with what I've seen from the CDC and how specific they are about what they recommend. And I think, we really can't be too careful right now, because we're still learning so much about the effects of this and how it's transmitted. And so we really encourage every teacher who signs up, we ask them to follow all the CDC guidelines. And some of the specifics of that are, for instance, that parents drop off children outside the house. So you're not having, potentially 6 different parents enter the space every day. So they're dropping off, and so the teachers are meeting them outside the location and bringing them inside. Again, the taking temperatures. Before the pandemic, kids would still come to school or preschool when they had like a slight cough or maybe some slight symptoms of some, even a cold. And we're obviously asking, if you're sick in any way, even if you don't think that it's COVID, stay home, because we just want to be as careful as we can. We don't want anybody to have to quarantine for 2 weeks. And then, if there is a scare, if anyone tests positive, then it is quarantining for 2 weeks and making sure everybody's safe before the micro school or the pod reopens.
Thanks. So how often do conflicts arise in the micro school setting among different families? And when conflicts arise, do you have a protocol in place for helping families to navigate those kinds of issues?
Yeah, that's it. I love these. That's a good question. So we're just getting I would say it's not very common. And the reason for that is because that we try to set up every expectation, every conversation that might come up in advance, so there's no surprises. And I think that is really a best practice for anyone, whether you're getting help with a micro school or not. Like, have every conversation up front. Have your social distancing conversation. Have your cost conversation. What happens during holidays? Does the micro school leader teacher still get paid? Are they getting paid for the 36 weeks or for the school year, or are they getting paid for the entire year? How are you treating it if you have to quarantine? Is the teacher still getting paid, or are they not getting paid? So I think that these conversations can be really easy, but you have to make sure you have them up front. Otherwise, every single one of these could become a deal breaker for parents, and especially with emotions high right now and everything that's happening in the world, kind of everybody's already on edge. So I think it's more important than ever that we set those expectations. So I have not seen, after a school is agreed upon and the teacher agrees that those are the right children and they agree on the expectations, it's very, very rare for anything to come up. But I have seen quite a few times those conversations, as you're talking about them, you realize you're not the best fit. So for instance, with our COVID agreement, there's been many times where families have said, no, I go on walks and I don't wear a mask. And the other families say, well, we all want to be wearing masks all the time, even if you're on a walk and you don't think you're going to walk past somebody. Or are you going to the grocery store? Are you getting groceries delivered? In some cases, people are being so careful because of other family members that they want to see that are elderly, that they're getting groceries delivered, and they ask the rest of the group to do that. That's not very common. Most people are going to the grocery store but wearing a mask. But those are the types of conversations I think that you don't want to see somebody in your neighborhood and see that they're not following the social distancing rules you thought they would in your group, and then you're not comfortable. So I've seen many times at least conversation, if not a little bit of conflict, on agreement and making sure that they're all on the same page with all of these types of factors right now.
So just kind of a follow-up to that, and this will be our last question that we have time for, but if a student were to get sick with COVID, do you have protocols in place for how a microschool would handle that?
Yeah, if anyone tests positive, or if anyone is thought to be sick, the CDC has specific guidelines on how to follow that. And really what we would ask the teacher to do, the teachers are running their own programs, they're setting their own prices. We're sort of all of the structure and support and the matching and kind of all of the help that's needed. But we, of course, ask every single one of them to follow all the CDC guidelines. And that means quarantining for 2 weeks. There's all kinds of different cleaning asks that are not even if somebody gets sick, but just regular expectations with cleaning. So there's definitely specific protocols in place for closing and making sure that it's 2 weeks and everybody is no longer sick, no symptoms, before agreeing as a group to reopen.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Shauna. That was extremely informative, and thank you to our audience, everyone who tuned in. This has been recorded and we'll make it available on our website, and we will be sending, to those of you who participated as registrants, we'll be sending you a link to go back and reference this at any time. Again, special thanks to you, special thanks to our audience, and thank you for joining us today, and that is it for today.